I'm particularly pleased to be here this morning because Break the Chains has been a project of Tide since we were founded 4 years ago. And it's been a really great relationship and partnership. So I was particularly honored that Drummond asked me to be part of this panel. And I think it's quite fitting that we talk about this issue inside of the broader distinction of talking about wars, because I think that there are a couple of issues related to that I hope that we'll engage with today, one of which is this myth that we're a peaceable country, because we're not. We were founded in violence. We've been engaged in warring on something or some people pretty much from inception. And the idea that somehow what we're doing in Iraq is a major exception, I think is not really true. But I'm here to talk about the war on drugs. And what I really want to do today is do three things. One, I want to talk about why the war on drugs is very similar to the war in Iraq and equally unwinnable. I want to talk specifically about things that we can do to help end that war and change the impact that it's having on so many lives of people, both in this country and around the world. And then finally, I want to talk a little bit about the distinction, war, and some new ideas that hopefully will gain some momentum out of our gathering here. So to begin with, I want to just start talking about the top 10 reasons. I made a quick list about why the war on drugs is like the war in Iraq. Reason number one, like the Iraq War, Americans were duped into supporting it based on false assumptions about drug use, addiction, and drug-related crime. You know, assumption that somehow you can scare people out of using drugs. Assumption you can punish them out of their addiction. That drug-related crime is about drugs and not about money. Two, like the Iraq War, the goalposts for winning are constantly shifting. First, we said that we wanted a drug-free America, which is kind of ridiculous in a country where you can't watch television for 20 minutes without seeing a commercial for some product that's going to help some condition that you didn't even know they had until they came up with a cure for it. But nonetheless, we started out with drug-free America. Then we said, well, we just wanted people to just say no. But when they kept saying yes, then we said, well, so maybe we just want to reduce drug use. And since we can't really reduce it across the board, we just want to reduce it among teenagers. So every year we get new statistics about that, which make us believe that somehow we're winning the war on drugs. And yet, those same kids are being fed Ritalin at a rate that's astonishing. Three, like the war on drugs, like the Iraq War, the casualties of the war on drugs are deliberately hidden from the public. In the same way that our government has chosen to make sure that we never see the body bags of the people that are dying on our behalf, we don't see the casualties of the war on drugs because we lock them up in prison for outrageously long periods of time. We hide them away from us when they get out. We impose all kinds of sanctions on them that continue long after they've gotten out of prison, if they ever get out, because, after all, if you've done drugs, you're a bad person, you must be punished. And in the U.S., you never stop being a felon. You're a felon for life. Like the Iraq War, we are regularly perpetrating human rights violations, including torture against innocent and defenseless people. You know, most people don't realize that among the folks who get caught up and hurt by the drug war are the people who acquire HIV/AIDS because we refuse to provide funding for needle exchange. Because in our world, if you're a drug user, we'd rather see you die than stay healthy. The innocent kids who lose their parents for 10, 15 years at a time. I find it amazing that we continue to have this conversation about the responsibility or lack of responsibility of black men, and yet we never talk about the policies that we put in place that make it impossible for them to feed their families, to be a man based on what we say being a man is about, or to find a place for themselves economically in the legitimate economy. We don't want to acknowledge the fact that in many parts of our country, drug dealers are the only equal opportunity employers. Like the Iraq War, by ignoring the casualties of the war on drugs, we are sowing the seeds for future discontent and calamity. You don't have to go very far from where we are right now to see the long-term impact of the things that we've been doing. It shows up in the lives of our youth who join gangs because they don't have parents, who join gangs because they are constantly under attack by the police, who believe that 5 youth of color together is a gang, 5 white kids in the suburbs is a club. And we continue to do that and think that that has no long-term impact on where we're going and what kind of country we're going to have. Like the Iraq War, the drug war is causing us to spend billions of dollars that have done very little to enhance public safety or significantly solve the underlying problem. When you think about the billions of dollars that we have spent fighting the war on drugs, and yet if you ask anyone, this whole idea of drug pushers is amazingly stupid to me, because all you have to do is let people know that you have the drugs. They sell themselves. All of what we've done has made very little difference in terms of availability, price, or access. But what we have done is funded a huge criminal enterprise that's perverted our system on so many different levels that I don't have time to talk about it. Like the Iraq War, the war on drugs has resulted in significant erosion of civil liberties in the name of national security. So it's fine for the police to knock down doors in the middle of the night in full military gear, or to come into school buildings with dogs early in the morning to look at 6th graders that they hold guns on because they're searching for marijuana. Okay, it's fine to get family members to snitch on each other to avoid a long sentence. We have this whole conversation about, witness intimidation and snitching, as if somehow the things that we've been doing with our law enforcement have not created an environment in which people do not trust the police on any level because they've been forced to turn on each other as the only way to avoid having to spend 15 or 20 years in prison for selling a small amount of drugs, usually not even worth the cost of what we locked them up for. Like the Iraq War, prosecution of the war on drugs has hurt our standing in the world community and negatively affected our foreign policy. I spent a week or so ago in Vienna at one of the meetings of NGOs looking at this issue, and I have to tell you, Americans should be ashamed of the way in which we bully the rest of the world into following our policies. It doesn't matter that the Swiss public believes that it's better for them to have safe places for addicts to inject so that they don't overdose, that it's okay, that they want needle exchange to reduce the spread of HIV/AIDS. We tell them, no, you can't do that. And those countries who rely on us for money, we do more than tell them no, we threaten them. Say, we'll take back our aid money if you don't do things the way that we say. And we don't care if that increases the level of violence and disease in your country. We just want you to continue following the U.S. line, even though our line is the wrong line. Like the Iraq War, public officials continue to support it, despite significant public disapproval. We're in California, the state that voted for medical marijuana, the state that voted for treatment over incarceration, due to the efforts of some of my colleagues who are right here in the room, I'm proud to say. Please. And yet, we have a federal government that refuses to acknowledge the legitimacy of those decisions. Somehow our notion of federalism, which is supposed to allow for some level of local control about issues that are important to the populace, gets completely disrespected when you start talking about drugs. So not only do we not allow for the local medical marijuana cooperatives to do their business and to serve the people who their doctors have sent to them, but in D.C., when voters there voted for a similar initiative, the Congress wouldn't even let them count the votes.